If you're not using Reddit and you call yourself a marketer, you are playing yourself. If you're not using Reddit and you study culture, then you're missing out on a huge opportunity.
Those reservations that brands had, especially in the 4chan era days, were real.
This is how culture works. Everything weird until it becomes normal. Fringe until it gets adopted into the populace. We're on Trapital. How can we talk about hip hop being an example of this, right? The same thing happens here. Did the platform change? Not really. It has just become more acceptable within the zeitgeist.
Both from a user growth perspective and from a monetization perspective, Reddit has been able to make a few leaps and bounds.
They found other ways to monetize what it does well. Large language models are a treasure trove of richness, and they have some of the most natural language happening from a community perspective.
But there's still this ongoing tension. The things that you do to increase monetization, you want to make sure you're doing that in a way where it doesn't come in contrast to the community. How would you balance both of those while still trying to grow and build a profitable company?
The social pressures of capitalism that make it difficult to scale and to keep one's integrity. Because oftentimes to scale, we have to extract more. For Reddit, the question becomes, what does it believe? Really, it's about how far am I willing to stretch my moral compass?
We're going to talk about the front page of the internet, Reddit. This company has had quite the journey over the past 20 years. Those early days of Reddit, it was the dark web, truly. Brands and advertisers wanted nothing to do with it. There was too much hate speech, too much anger, too much porn, and a lot of stuff that wasn't suitable for work. This was the Woodstock 99 of social media platforms. But to Reddit's credit, things have turned around. In 2019, the company crossed $100 million in revenue for the first time. In 2024, the company crossed $1 billion in revenue and had its first profitable quarter ever. It says a lot about the brands, advertisers, users, and more who see value in Reddit. And it finally starts to feel like the company is closing that gap between its monetization and its cultural impact. But Reddit's not in the clear by any means. The start of 2025 has been a bit rough, to say the least. The stock has been in a free fall and has lost half of its market cap since the beginning of February. Reddit's CEO and leadership shared that after a slight tweak in Google's algorithm, it caused Reddit to miss its earnings target for that quarter. That is the last thing that investors want to hear. A company, especially a social media company, that is too reliant on another company's decisions for its own success. And when you couple that with the broader opportunity of Reddit continuing to toe that line between optimizing the community and everything that makes Reddit the treasure trove of insights and authenticity that it is, with the desire to build a business that can truly monetize the same way that other social media platforms have. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. I'm joined by our friend of the pod who has done a ton of research on Reddit, Dr. Marcus Collins. He's an author, researcher, marketer, and a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this topic. And it's been a while since Marcus has been on the pod, so it's a great opportunity to chop it up with him, get to catch up, and hear the latest. So I hope you enjoy as we dive into the front page of the internet. Let's dive in. All right, we're here to do a deep dive on Reddit, and we're joined by someone who knows more about Reddit than most people I know, and that is Dr. Marcus Collins. Welcome back to the show, man.
Man, this feels like home. Thanks for having me back.
This topic with Reddit has been something of a theme that we've been talking about recently on the show. We've been talking about a lot of social media platforms that have a stronger cultural influence than the actual business that they're actually able to drive. I'd love to hear from you what your experience has been like with Reddit, like when you first really tapped in. I know it was big for you with a lot of the research that you've done professionally, so we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, Reddit provides great utility for society and our ability to not only get access to information from people like us, but also to find community among people like us. My first interaction with Reddit was as a marketer. It wasn't even as a user. I worked in social media marketing, so a lot of my work was about what's the new thing that people are doing and what's different about this platform than something else. And I think I wrote off Reddit early because the aesthetic of it didn't feel like the social networking platforms. Like Facebook was much more sophisticated in the way it presented. Instagram was a lot slicker. And the perception of Reddit at the time was that this was one step away from 4chan. It was one step away from the dark web. Things you don't want to be a part of happens on Reddit. So brands were always a bit skittish about using the platform. And what I found is that things being discussed on Reddit were happening just a click or two before they were adopted in the populace. And I go, oh, this is actually good for a marketer who's trying to put things in the world that adopt it into the populace. Understanding where the puck is going before it gets there becomes extremely valuable. So I started using Reddit as a market research tool. And it really got interesting for me as my understanding of culture began to expand. One would arguably say deepen. And I started to realize that what was happening on Reddit, it wasn't a social networking platform. This is a community of communities where people who are in subreddits, i.e. subcultures, these small communities, were negotiating and constructing what's acceptable for people like me. And as they started making meaning collectively, it started to get adopted into the populace, much like anything that diffuses through the Gaussian curve. And I go, oh, this is unbelievable. So not only did it help me as a practitioner get closer to these communities, get greater intimacy with these communities, but it helped me as a researcher who was studying culture, as a PhD student at this point, saying that if I want to understand how things are constructed within community, Reddit becomes a very compelling research site to watch these things happen unobtrusively.
So what year was this for you that this transition happened, that you found this insight with Reddit?
It had to be around 2017. Now, at this point, Reddit was moving over to creating an ad platform, right? They were trying to get more brands to advertise, like to buy media on the platform around 2015, 2016. So I started meeting more like Reddit reps, like people who worked at Reddit, who were telling me about the platform, the kind of changes that they were making. And so I think clients were becoming a little bit more curious, which made me a little bit more curious. And that thankfully, serendipitously, I started to realize the research benefit of these communities. So 2017, 2016, when things start to really switch, I go, oh my goodness, if you're not using Reddit and you call yourself a marketer, you are playing yourself. If you're not using Reddit and you study culture, then you're missing out on a huge opportunity.
That timing is interesting because that felt like the time that a lot of people were saying a lot of the same stuff you're saying, but about Twitter or some of the other social media platforms. But it wasn't quite on the fringes. A lot of the things in the discussions that are happening on places like Twitter, sure, they were ahead of the rest of the discourse, but it wasn't the same way that it was on Reddit. There's certain aspects of it, the anonymity and purely text-based, that really was ahead of the curve compared to other platforms.
Yeah, I think Twitter was closer to the zeitgeist than Reddit was. Twitter, in many cases, sat where things were about to cross the chasm into the populace. But Reddit felt more like the innovators section of that. And by that I mean, it were people who self-identify as members of this community, not because they were just consumers of it, but they were contributors to it as well. And what made Reddit more powerful for me than Twitter is that Twitter was sort of gen pop. Like, it's hard to see if you are part of a community or just a consumer of its production. It's hard to see if you are a hip hop head or just like hip hop. And there are two differences. One is about identity, one is about consumption. With Reddit, these are communities that people opt into. And not only do they opt into it, to engage in the community, you have to abide by the cultural characteristics of the community. There is a moderator who are making sure that whatever is being said, whatever is being contributed to the discourse is within the rules of what people like us do. They essentially, the moderators are cleaning the data for researchers or for marketers. They're cleaning the data from noise that you would normally get through Twitter's gibberish to see a community of people who are engaging in the meaning-making process based upon the cultural characteristics of the community. You cannot get better data than this in the zeros and ones world, at least especially at that time. The only way you can get that is through ethnographic means, like going to where they are in the physical space. But this idea of observing communities engage in their cultural practices unobtrusively became a rich means by which we can get a sense of who they are, what makes them tick, what matters to them, and what's on their mind. The methodology by which this is done is called a netnography. And that data is so much cleaner than looking at Twitter because it is confined by the community and its cultural conventions.
The community moderation piece was the thing that stuck out to me as well when I first really got into it. And I put this around 2018-19 timeframe. This is when I started Trapital. And a lot of people had said, you should start a subreddit. You should start our Trapital and have a community there. And I didn't even have a username myself. The moderators in some of those groups had very strict rules. And even if you abided by those rules, sometimes they would come back and they would poke holes deeper than anyone else would on any of the other things. That's when, because of those two things, it was like, okay, I got to be up on my shit. I got to be ready when I am posting something. And it's for good reason. One, I get helpful feedback. The feedback loops are quick. And because of the anonymous nature of it, people are probably more willing to say certain things. But additionally, with the community norms and the rules, there are little things like you can't just post links and then drop, right? That isn't community building. You need to add to discussion. You need to have at least 3 posts that are somewhat around this particular thing before you just post and ask a request for something like that. It felt true and germane to Reddit. That is one of the unique things that I think really makes the platform stand out.
Reddit was helping to facilitate community, not just a group of users with shared interests. In fact, my doctoral dissertation was based on Reddit data, 100% Reddit data, like to see how these collectives of people were deciding what's acceptable for people like me. What do people like me do? What's cool? What's whack? What's in? What's out? And from that, I got some really rich understandings that kind of became the foundation to a lot of the work I do now. Like I scaffold my work today based on a lot of that learning there. And you couldn't do that anywhere else at that scale, even in person. And no other platform available to us at that time, like a Twitter or Facebook, can never provide that for every reason that you just mentioned. Community versus a space. Community members versus users. Beliefs and ideologies versus interests. The differences are massive. And the learnings that come from it make all the difference between the things that get adopted and the things that get seen.
A lot of that there has to do with your work from a professional perspective, but what about you from a personal side? What's your relationship with Reddit like from that perspective?
In many ways, Reddit is a go-to data source for me as a search engine. I use Google search, I use TikTok as a search engine, and I use Reddit as a search engine. And I go, what's going on here? What's really happening here? What are the people within this community saying? We talk about A24, so we get the movie buff thing. I'm one of those people that I watch a movie and I go, okay, I gotta know what people think about this thing. Not like what Gen Pop thinks, not like what Rotten Tomatoes thinks. I wanna know people who are like a part of this community, people who are cinemaphiles, people who are into this genre, what they think and how they unpack the semiotics of the movie. I go to Reddit for that. Like Reddit is where that's happening. It's not for everybody. It's for people like me. And that's what culture moves forward on. The basis of one simple question. Do people like me do something like this? The answer is yes, we do. If the answer is no, we don't. And we make the decision so many times, thousands of times a day. And those things are being negotiated in our communities. And as a part of a community, be it my fraternity, be it my religion, be it my interest, I want to know what people like me are saying and thinking. And as a result, I decide what I think, what I say, and ultimately what I do.
I can relate to a lot of that. Reddit is so powerful to provide the authentic responses to a particular question or insights I have, because Google, one of the drawbacks of that is that you get a lot of the outcomes of monetization, such as SEO or sponsored links. When I have a nuanced question, I don't want to read the SEO link. I don't want to read the sponsored link. I want to read a unfiltered thought that community members upvoted to the top to make me get an idea for what a nuanced conversation is, hear different perspectives, and even if I'm not contributing to that community, be a lurker and benefit from being a lurker and being able to gain that insight.
And we didn't even get into the upvoting mechanism good night. It's basically a cosign. It makes people going, yep, word, or in church, amen. Like it's the amen corner. And the idea that if the community feels like this is the most valued, profound, helpful contribution to the discourse, who wouldn't want that?
Which is so different from likes or retweets on any other social media platform. Sure, there's some nature of the things that get the most likes and retweets are the things that people endorse or show some attention for, but there's also a lot of algorithmically driven things that can make something pop more than others, and we've seen endless debates about that with Twitter and Facebook over the years. That doesn't exist in the same way as Reddit. So an upvote does mean a lot more than a like or a repost or retweet.
Yeah, it's like the difference between popularity and validation. A lot of people have said that this is the thing. They vouch for it. It's a good housekeeping seal versus a public progress bar. And either that in a world where the algorithm forms basically everything that we do, the cultural flattening, as some scholars have referred to it, to get the real from people like me and their housekeeping seal of certified dopeness makes a big difference.
People would talk about how Gen Z was using TikTok as
Yep.
a search engine. And there is an aspect of it there where, sure, the algorithm is still a factor with TikTok, but there is something about just quickly being able to watch a short form video that's a product review about something I may be interested in. I've done it with sneakers. I've done it with mattresses, random things that I probably wouldn't have even thought about doing years ago. I would have just went straight to Google. It's interesting to just see how all of these platforms have different roles here.
I mean, TikTok is beastly. I mean, its algorithm is unbelievable in its ability to find the intersections of the things that you're interested in and deliver to them with money back guarantee. Like, you don't need to swipe. The next thing is going to be great. Trust me. That's pretty awesome. And the many factions of society, subcultures that are represented across TikTok and done to a great prolific nature is really impressive. This is why a TikTok and a Reddit sort of sits outside of social networking platforms as we typically think about them. It sits outside of a Facebook, outside of Instagram, even outside of a LinkedIn. TikTok, I wouldn't even call it a social networking platform. They are a capture of the broader zeitgeist in its smallest fashions, whether it's something that's super big or super small. I think that Reddit is a community of communities where you observing community make meaning, and you get two different things from those two different platforms, but each one of them provides something very rich and very powerful.
I like that. Another thing I was thinking about too is the time frame of when you and I had started to really tap into Reddit versus where it is now also aligned with the business and revenue growth that we've seen. Back in those days, late 2010s, this was a company that was doing under $100 million in revenue annually. It was not profitable. We're now here in 2025. This is a publicly traded company that reported over $1 billion in revenue in 2024. So that's a huge jump. We had the pandemic and we had the meme stocks and the short squeeze with GameStop, AMC, Hertz, and all of these other companies. But it seems like both from a user growth perspective and from a monetization perspective, Reddit has been able to make a few leaps and bounds specifically in the past 7 years.
For sure. They've been able to grow with regards to users because they've been able to see the benefit of Reddit, the unique benefit of Reddit relative to the competitor set, if we call social networking platform the category in which people typically think of it. Not only that, but they found other ways to monetize what it does well. Large language models are a treasure trove of richness. And they have some of the most natural language happening from a community perspective. That is extremely valuable. I was fortunate to be able to get access to Reddit data before some of these guardrails got put up through the API. I had tons of that data, but now that data is very expensive, right? So that data is very valuable. And therefore, Reddit is able to monetize it because that's the oil of services these days. Providing search results in Google, another really smart move. Google provides an AI offering, a community offering, and then search links, right? It's a really smart move on behalf of Google and on Reddit, ways in which this thing can grow. And interestingly, like I see brands that are showing up, having a footprint on the space, that it feels like they're understanding why community is more important than popularity. That if we're able to resonate in community, if we're able to activate communities, then popularity will be a byproduct of its network effects. I remember doing this really interesting campaign with Egos back in, it had to be 2019, maybe 2018. This was during Stranger Things' third season. They asked us, like, how do we activate Stranger Things fans, get them excited for the third season, but also get them excited about Eggo waffles? So I went to Reddit to see what are the cultural conventions of these groups of people. And we found some really interesting things. And the things that got us really excited as we looked at Stranger Things fans and these different subreddits they're a part of is that one of the greatest things in the community that provides social currency is your ability to be a sleuth. Your ability to say, this happened in season 2, episode 3 at 2 minutes and 33 seconds. And then that refers to that happened in season 1, episode 7, 24 minutes and 11 seconds. So therefore, Hopper's going to do blah, blah, blah. And the more accurate you were in your predictions, the more social currency you got. So we were like, oh, let's activate that. Let's do that. Let's activate this idea of being inner sleuths. And the goal for us was that we're going to create a campaign. It's going to live across the internet, but we're not going to post anything on Reddit. But if the campaign shows up on Reddit, then we've succeeded. Because why? Because that's where the community is. And that's where the community is negotiating and constructing meaning. Reddit, if that's where you end up, you did a good thing, to being like, I'm going to go there first. And I think that that's a really powerful transition, and one would argue a proof point of Reddit's adoption into the zeitgeist, from being this fringe thing to being normal.
It's a huge proof of concept. Those reservations that brands had, especially in the 4chan era days, were real. And to be fair, a lot of this stuff hasn't completely gone away. There is still a challenge with pornography or hate speech, and advertisers and brands may have understandable concerns about what they are positioning themselves and not positioning themselves with. That's one part of it. But then secondly, text-based social platforms have always had a relatively tougher time monetizing compared to pictures and video platforms, just given the inherent nature of display advertising and consumption patterns and what leads to actual intent to purchase. And also thinking about the community aspect, even though Reddit is in itself this community of communities with different people in different niches, there is something that is collectively true about the type of person that is going to be at the fringes on this type of thing, on this type of platform, and how receptive is that type of person to embrace, engage, or go through with an advertisement. So all the things they've done, such as monetizing the front page or micro communities, display ads, all of those things make sense. And it is a tough job to be able to do this effectively. And to get to where it's gotten in the past 7 years is pretty incredible.
I got to give all the props to the folks over there. I mean, Reddit is just really brilliant people that are running that business. Steve Huffman, who's the co-founder and CEO, he was laser focused. He and Alex Ohanian started this thing. Alex exited and Steve kept it going. You've got people who understand culture, understand brand, and understand the technology. And the intersection of those three have enabled them to extract so much value from their proximity, from their intimacy, that enabled this business to not only grow, but the community to grow as well.
One thing you said that made me think about how brands or how companies leverage Reddit is AMAs. And the AMAs there feel so much more authentic and real compared to some of the AMAs that exist on traditional social media platforms. And it's for a lot of the things that we're saying, especially if you're trying to reach the community of your particular product or group that is already at the edges.
It's interesting that Reddit mitigates the puffery that people typically present themselves with when they're on social networking platforms. They want to know, they want to learn, they want to contribute, they want to engage, they want to be a part of community. And there's a great benefit to that when you're trying to better understand who people are and what you can learn from them. And And this is what community is all about. This is the difference between communities and consumers. Consumers act in a certain way, but communities believe a certain thing, and therefore they act in a certain way. And whether you're a marketer, community member, a scholar, or a researcher, it is a treasure trove of information to better understand humanity.
Are there any particular types of brands or companies that are more likely to benefit from Reddit than others?
I would say the brands that have either explicitly invested in facilitating community, or the brands who have had the great fortune of people creating community around it without the brand's participation. So you either have done it intentionally or you've benefited from serendipity. But there's a community for everything on the platform. And for brands to not be a part of that is their own volition. On Reddit, it's better for the former, where people create and then the brand comes and participates, because when the brand starts it, it feels self-serving. But when people start, it feels humanity focused. And the brand is then contributing and participating in the reciprocity that exists within humanity.
I think Reddit also makes me think of YouTube. YouTube is a much bigger business, but both started in 2005. In the past 5 years, both of these companies exceeds anything that they've done in 15 years before that. Granted, the 15 years before that set the groundwork and the stage, but you think about those early days of YouTube, a lot of the big brands that now invest heavily in it wouldn't have touched it even nearly as much as they do now. It was seen as the fringes. It was seen as the place where Logan Paul would do whatever he was doing, or people would get canceled, or podcasters or others that were too controversial for other places. But then everyone now has a platform.
That's right. That's right. This is how culture works. Everything weird until it becomes normal. Fringe until it gets adopted into the populace. We're on Trapital. How can we not talk about hip hop being an example of this, right? Hip hop was weird. It wasn't even considered music. It was fringe. What do you mean? These guys are just talking over somebody else's music. Ugh. Until it became adopted into the populace. Like back in the day, brands would want to be close to a rapper. Are you kidding me? What? No. No way. Like, they're not brand safe. That's beneath me. Blah, blah, blah. Now clamoring to get close to rappers. This is how all things go in culture. When things are seemed socially risky, we tend to avoid it unless you are risk loving as an individual or as a brand. And when someone's willing to look silly, it's just for a moment. Signals to people that this is a possibility. And they go, you see that? What do you think? Is this cool? Is this acceptable? Should we do this? And as more people do it, more people do it. Where they say, nothing draws a crowd like a crowd. And the same thing happens here. What was once considered fringe and risky and not brand safe is all of a sudden miraculously okay. Did the platform change? Not really. Reddit still very much designed the way it's been designed, and the community will flog you if you tried to change its architecture. The product itself hasn't changed terribly. New additions here and there, but by and large, it's the same thing. It has just become more acceptable within the zeitgeist, and therefore you see more brands in it, more people in it, and its data becoming much more digestible to the populace.
It's like that classic video, the one person that's dancing in the middle of this field in this music festival. They start dancing by themselves all crazy, and then two people join, and then all of a sudden it's this whole party that's joining. That one person in the beginning, that was the Reddit of that type of situation.
That's right.
That was the early adopter of that type of platform.
That's right. What you just described, that was that TED Talk, a video from a TED Talk, is social contagion. It's the adoption of new affects, behaviors, cognitions, and desires based on direct or indirect peer observation, right? And we observe other people. We go, oh, you do this? I didn't know. I didn't know this was acceptable. And then before long, everyone's doing it.
So Reddit, of course, the company's in a stronger position than it's ever been. It hit profitability in 2024. But there's still this ongoing tension of the things that you do to increase monetization. You want to make sure you're doing that in a way where it doesn't come in contrast to the community and the experience that users have when they're using this platform. So if you were in charge and you were trying to help push things forward, how would you balance both of those while still trying to grow and build a profitable company?
This is the hard part. And I think that it's not just the challenge of scaling, because that's hard. It is the social pressures of capitalism that make it difficult to scale and to keep one's integrity. Because oftentimes to scale, we have to extract more. We have to exploit more, whether it's our labor force, whether it's our user base, our community. How do I pull more from them, take their data, use their natural language, all these things. And the act of exploiting oftentimes knows no bounds. And this is really how capitalism transforms things that were in service of us to things that are exploiting us. So for Reddit, the question becomes, what does it believe? What are the moral compass of the organization that they're saying, no matter what, we won't sacrifice this? And knowing what I know of Steve and the leadership team, I think that like they are in a tough position because now they're public, there's great expectations to draw shareholder value. But at the same time, they do feel a great sense of obligation and responsibility to their community, such that they're not going to appropriate and exploit their contribution to the platform. So that is a long way of not answering the question to say, really, it's about how far am I willing to stretch my moral compass? And at some point, we say, it's not worth degrading the community. And then say, we're big enough. We made enough money. If we make a little bit more money, great. But we are big enough. And when you rarely see those brands do that kind of thing, you look at them and go, man, I respect them so much. Like a Patagonia. Patagonia says, we did enough. Yeah, we're not going to exploit. We're not going to exploit our labor, our people more. We're not going to exploit the planet more. If we don't grow any more than where we are now, all good, right? And if we do, great. But we're not going to compromise our beliefs. And my prayer, inshallah, and my hope, and my confidence, the team over at Reddit, Steve and the team, is that they'll stay true to who they are and who their communities are.
Words that I unfortunately rarely hear about publicly traded companies. Some private, though. You may hear it, but I do think that there's probably been enough lessons learned from how a lot of social media platforms have gone through their own enshittification process. I think the fact that the platform lives the way that it is today and is profitable is great. Of course, public markets do put a certain level of pressure on it, but this is a platform that we all put in a slightly different category for good reason.
Amen. We started the podcast saying it provides a lot of social good. There's great utility in this platform. And I think that we benefit from it. And then there's the outside of social utility, be it from a practicing perspective, as a professional marketer, definitely with the acquisition of knowledge as a researcher. So I want to see it succeed. I want to see it grow, but I want to see it maintain its integrity.
Right. And I do think with a platform like this, it's possible. So, yeah. Marcus, appreciate you coming on. This is a lot of fun.
Fam, always. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. For more breakdowns like this on the business of entertainment, media, and technology, make sure you like and subscribe to stay up to the latest on any of the insights that we have on Trapital, and make sure that you tell a friend about it as well. That helps continue to make sure that our show reaches the right people. Thanks again. Talk to you next time.